Omari and Disfanaro that is upside down at the moment. So hopefully those ladies can get their boat up nice and quickly, as we see we're within that 1 minute now, 50 seconds to go. And a nice even spread down the line, probably a little bit more density up at that boat end. What do you guys think?
Yeah, a little bit right-hand favoured at the moment. There's breeze on, plenty of breeze, 15 knots. It's Gold Fleet. We're going to have 2 Gold Fleet races then into the medal race later in the day for all classes. And we are now inside the last 30 seconds. So pretty well locked in to where they will start, what zone on the start line, and who can push forward, bow forward. And we'll look for the tactics left or right. In terms of line bias, I think it might be pretty even, so hence why the boats are up towards the committee boat.
Real hustle now. You can see those masts waving around as they're pumping their boat to get it into the right position. 5 seconds to go now. See these girls pull the trigger. 2, 1, and these guys are racing. A few boats struggling with that speed build in the middle of the line. USA 9 has got off to a good start. Sweden 5 as well. And Austria 61 is your pin boat as it stands.
We're underway. I thought I heard a second signal. I'm not sure whether we can pick up on that or not, but we are certainly underway with this race. It's race 10.
The fleet looked just a little bit off the line by about a boat length and a half or so. You didn't see the people right up on, you didn't see the boats right up on the corners punching out. And I thought that was maybe, you know, after a long day of waiting, they didn't want to make any mistakes. There's a lot at stake here.
On board here now with Heineken and Anna Tobias there. These girls, you can see them getting their shoulders right back, getting their weight out. You can see the Danish team 49 just off those shoulders, and we've heard about the hot fight against the Danish teams. And I can give you an update that the other Danish team has tacked off. So these guys have split across the course. Not so much keeping each other tucked away. They're really focusing on getting the best race out that they can today.
Yeah, nice even spread across the field as they head up this first windward beat. Looks like the majority of the fleet have stayed on starboard and they've found a lane. A few of the boats that were forced to tack away would have been a clearing tack. Good, and Nielsby from Denmark. We've got camera on board. We can look at their style. There's a little bit more seaway running, so that's going to just make it a little bit more spicy. And as the wind builds later in the day, I expect it to get quite choppy.
I love those shots on board. You can see how hard the crew works in these boats. They are the accelerator of the boat, and they're working that main sheet. The boom is just constantly moving. This boat goes its fastest when it's dead flat through the water, and it is quite a juggle with their controls. So they've got the Vang and the Cunningham at their feet there, but they're moving that main sheet constantly to try to keep that angle of attack or angle of heel through the water dead straight. Nice little tack here from the Austrians. They'll be under a bit of pressure now with the Swedish team 15 tacking right in front of them.
So boats now starting to peel away as we look at the leaderboard. It's still early days and the leaderboard will jump around a little bit, but there's a good indication there who make up that top 10. As we can see in the middle of the field there, we've got Sweden showing to be Gross and Klinger in the lead.
Also, an interesting turn of events here. Schutt and Nielsby, Denmark 49, appears to have done a penalty turn during that upwind. So a little bit of a hit with them. Perhaps they've had a little bit of an altercation with another team.
Yeah, port and starboard there. See, that could be an incident there. Finland came across on port. The US team had to crash, tack. They were the right-of-way bait, USA 9, and they really, I think Finland may well have incurred a penalty there.
Penalties happening all over the board. We've also got Dobson and Tidy also doing a penalty turn on this upwind as well. These girls are doing loops, and it is the way. You're better to be safe than sorry. You don't want to end this day in the room. If there's any indication that you are in the wrong, you'll see these girls, they're so good on their boat handling, getting that turn in, turning a fresh page and trying to get the best result they can.
Chris, what did you think of that one? Henkin and Tobias looked like they had to give way.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing. Both boats are going the way they want to go, and if there's not room for a duck and they're head-to-head, something has to give. And it seems to me that they both wanted to go the way they wanted to go, and it really did look like the USA had to kind of clear out of there. But you don't see Finland doing any turns.
I can see it on the tracker, so they have just got their turn in
they
now.
did.
So
Okay.
it was off camera. We missed that moment, but these girls have done their penalty turns. That makes 3 now in this race.
Yeah, and we saw that this whole the majority of the fleet went left and then took a little shift and headed back. But there's about 4 or 5 boats, maybe even the British off to the right, that are only a couple boats are going to come out of that side. Usually one side is a dominant side, but if you win the non-dominant side, you should come out in the top group at the weather mark.
Good shape in the middle there for Lutz and Weimers from Germany. They cleared out from that bunch, and right now they're showing to be in a nice lane, heading across on port. It's a good break there. Good recovery from Henkin and Tobias. With they had to do a crash tack. They came in on starboard. They had the right. Wasn't a great tack for them, but they've managed that. They're on the right side of the course, so we see the USA team up there in a close 5th.
And that pack that we are following here, Germany 5, USA 9, they do have a slightly better angle coming across on port currently than the boats that are further to the right on the same tack. But a few interesting crosses here. You can see on your screen those teams coming across on starboard. We will be able to see how these guys have shaped up. They've had a small split, but generally these girls are keeping a pretty close watch on one another.
And let's watch as they go up the course. There's just a handful of boats off to the right-hand side. Really 3, maybe 4 boats on the right. They're legged out there. They tacked out there early. The middle group is as we saw, they're fighting with each other. They're doing penalty circles. So even if the breeze doesn't fully come in from the right, that group has done a lot less maneuvering and been straight line speed for a long time.
Yeah, so I'll give you an update on who those teams are. There's Westler and Netzler. The Swedish team, also Squares and Van der Weyden, Spain 21, and Stabæk and Elks, Australia 31. So they are the main 3 boats that have broken out from the pack over on that right-hand side.
Yeah, the group that started up on the committee boat, and they went right, and they didn't get involved with that arm wrestle in the middle of the track, have done nicely, the top 3. Then we've got Ten Hove, is it, from Ten Hove, and Millen from Canada up there as well, also on that right-hand group.
And look at this conversion. These guys are coming together. You've got a great shot of that with your SAP trackers there. These guys are going to be coming in super close, but to me it looks like perhaps the right-hand pack may have a slight advantage coming into this cross.
Just a little note about the Canadians. They knew that they were quite a bit out of getting into the medal race, but they were very upbeat this morning when we spoke with them. Both of those sailors, their fathers went to the Olympic Games.
Oh, nice. That's a great little byplay. Well, they certainly have picked it nicely off the line. They've got over to the right, just below the starboard ley line, the Canadian team.
Looks like Heineken and Tobias have just found a 6th gear there. They're sailing super high, and they will just get across the Swedish team, Westler and Nestler, and a nice close cross, perhaps with Lutz and Weimers. And an undertack, there it is.
That's a big cross, and given they were compromised up that first woman beat, it would mean that Henkin and Tobias, I think they're showing good speed. First time I've seen Echegayen, Barcelo, the overall leaders, they certainly are in that pack, looking to push forward.
It's really important to recognize the teams that are kind of on the bubble, and we identified the Norway team, Ness and Renningen. We talked to them earlier, and they're 10 to 12 points out, but they really were hoping that they'd squeeze in. They're kind of the last people that can possibly get in the medal race. And Helena Ness has been suffering the last 10, 12 days in antibiotics from an ear infection. So she's been struggling this week, but they're probably one of the last teams that can try to get in the medal race if all things line up their way.
Just having a quick check-in with our equal first race place. It is Charlotte Dobson and Saskia Tidy. These girls are right out on the right-hand side in a little bit of gas. They may have a little bit of pain coming into this top mark, so we'll have to really keep an eye on them and see if they can work their way through the fleet, because this is where that medal shot could be at risk, and obviously they want to take away the gold. The pressure's being applied by Tamara Echegayen, and she's coming in quite strong to this top mark.
Ichigoyen is looking fast. In fact, currently where it stands overall, and we'll talk about this more, that would mean if places as they stand now, we would actually have an overall lead change for the regatta.
And we were just on board there with your race leaders, USA 9. These girls have had an excellent upwind, and this top mark is brought to you by Ford Whip. Go faster on the water, and they've absolutely nailed that bearaway too.
Second around, it will be the German team. That's Lutz and Weimers.
A little struggle there keeping the boat flat on that bearaway, and the Swedish team have absolutely nailed it. We may see a little change in positioning here if they can nail that set.
Yeah, good set by the Spanish down to leeward while the two were fighting to windward. Ichigoyen, who's really starting to stamp a mark on this regatta, came round the mark in fifth. Just ahead of them, there was their countryman from Spanish. Are really enjoying these conditions. Two in the top five is impressive.
And they've all made an early jibe. Now they're jibing back into the centre of the course. And back on board here with Schutt and Nielsby. These girls are just getting around that top mark.
We talked to Tamara and Paula from Spain this morning, and they've just been very slowly all week long working their way up the ranks. They didn't start off super strong, and when we talked to Tamara this morning, she said they had to have conversations with themselves. The weather's been so tricky and up and down this week that they had to just say, yeah, we know the wind is all over the place, but we just have to take this one leg at a time, one puff at a time.
I'm curious, you know, a lot of these girls in that top pack did hedge out a little bit to the left on the upwind, and they are like they've kind of changed their game plan here. Maybe tells you that it's a little bit shifty because they are in a lovely line, really knocking away on the making jibe to this bottom mark.
Just looking at the overall leader going into the race, they're way back in 24th. So the Brits are deep. Can they? Charlotte Dobson and Sashka Tidy will look for them. They're in a deep position, but we know the champion sailors can move through the fleet. So they've got some work to do. Take a mental note where they are now and see where they finish. Given their speed and given their performance so far this week, I'd expect them to move back up into contention.
And it is Nace and Ronigan that haven't made that break back to that left-hand side looking downwind of this course. So they are the ones that have broken away from the pack. A little bit of work for those girls to do to get themselves in the top 10, and you can kind of see that in their game plan, leveraging out. They really need to put a few good scores on the scoreboard right now.
Popping up into the ranks, we're seeing Martina Grail and her crew Kunz. And we haven't seen, she's almost on the bubble if you look at the scores. And, you know, she's an Olympic medalist. She's a world champion. And the one thing we were talking about with Martine, she was one of the only crews in the park that didn't look pretty relaxed. And I talked to Ben Remacher about this. And if you pay attention to Martine, she wears her emotions on her sleeve. And if she's upset, she'll show it. And but she's not going to hang on to the past. She doesn't really carry around a lot of baggage, and she's not afraid of her emotions. And so if they say the weather report says it's supposed to be really shifty and it's really steady, or vice versa, she just moves on with it. And we even saw that with her, that kind of behavior when we had a koala in the room, and she just couldn't stop herself. She just wanted to go up and hug the koala. So that kind of you know, not being afraid of your emotions, I think Martine's starting to step up when she needs to right now, so look for her to keep climbing the ranks.
Here's our race leader heading down towards the bottom mark. It's breeze on. We'd expect this to build as the day goes on. Look, just a little bit higher by the helmsman, Henkin. As they go in for a jibe, keep out of the water. At bottom mark. They're in the bottom mark gate. A good solid lead for the Americans. As they come round, the Jenica is sucked away into the tube, and they are on their way up leg 3.
You can tell that was... Go ahead.
I am impressed. I mean, they got absolutely held up at that upwind when they had to you really take avoiding action when they're in the right, but they've absolutely smashed it. And I'd put this down. They must be fast in this fresh condition to move away from the fleet as much as they have.
That's a really great sign. In that port and starboard with Finland, when they tacked away, it was not a great tack. They were deep. They were on other people's hips. But pay attention to them. They've learned how to, get on with it. The nerves aren't getting them, and they got on with it. If they were really nervous today, that little maneuver, they wouldn't have been pushing as hard forward. So
really tight rounding happening here. Echegoyen and Barcelo, they've taken that left mark. Wessler and Nessler following, but Lutz and Weimers have taken that right-hand gate and leading the way in that direction is the Spanish team as well. Really tight racing here, and these guys are having to make that decision from about 1/3 of the downwind to which mark that they're going to be taking, and it does create a lot of tactical manoeuvres down there, and we saw them nearly rounding 2 boats wide. Echegoyen sailing off nice and low. We know those guys are good in the heavy air, and they're really boosting out of that bottom mark.
Yeah, it's moving through the fleet for Echegoyen. She was going up that first windward beat. I saw them back in 5th and 6th. They've now jumped up the field. They look tidy on the downwind. So the really strong sailors, strong crews are starting to move through. I think this is a bit of an arm wrestle day, a boat speed day. It looks the patterning over the water. It just looks like we're going to have great racing. And the strong crews will come through in a day like today. Especially
on those downwinds, they're sailing long legs, and it is that drag race, trying to keep your air clear and picking a good lane where you can't get into too much trouble. And it was Echegoyen and Heineken and Tobias that have done a really good job of that in that downwind.
So we've got this group heading off on starboard, led by Heineken and Tobias. And then Echegoyen is to windward and behind. And then on the other side, who took the other gate, we've got the other Spanish crew, Suez and Van der Velden. And the Spanish are really enjoying these conditions here in Geelong. But Heineken and Tobias, it's a solid lead. Put that down to good upwind top mark approach, and blisteringly fast on that downwind leg. I'll be interested in the cross between the two Spanish teams as we come back. It is showing that the boat coming across on starboard is still bow ahead.
They have done that tack in front now as well, so they're consolidating there, and we'll make that cross a little bit later. Speaking of Van der Velden, she's another one of the girls that have made that transition from NACRA into 49er, and she was a NACRA skipper for Aruba, and she was also the flag bearer at the Olympic Games, and she's made that switch now to 49er crew, and it's really cool to see the skill set of the two classes is really interchangeable. These girls and guys, across the two classes are really talented sailors, and that talent does transition and translate between the two classes.
Nina, looking at these sailors, I mean, the American team, USA 9, has been really strong in breeze. It's been kind of obvious at times. Is it not unusual to have standout teams for conditions? I mean, you ideally you want to be great at everything. But
yeah, Peter's been talking about it for quite some time, that everyone has their niche condition. I think what makes true champion sailors is the ability to perform under any condition, and you really have to work hard in your weaknesses. I mean, but speaking directly to Heineken and Tobias, they've got one of the fittest women on the earth on board, Anna Tobias. She is a CrossFitter, and I think she is a Masters World Champion in there. So I'm sure a little bit of that brute strength can really go a long way in these conditions. The boats can get quite physical, especially if you get a few waves over the bow. That spinnaker can be an absolute beast to pull up. And Paris Heineken, she's got the right girl for the job in the front of her boat, and they are performing really well. Same for Echegoyen, she's a really strong sailor.
We're just seeing there on the tracking, you can see there looks like it's a bit of a a left-hand shift coming through, and you can see the tracking lines are going along, and then there's this persistent grind over to the left by both the American boat and the Spanish boat who's behind and to leeward. Now that could really pay for the benefit of the boats that are on the left as they head. They're about midway up, middle of the course. There's certainly been a bit of a wind shift. might be
Nina,
starting to fade back a bit as we watch.
And there are a few teams that have leveraged even further to that left side. Nielsen and Olsen, Denmark 3, have made a real big dig out to the left, and also Frank and Albrecht, Austria 61, they are also out there to the left.
Nina, on the FX, when sometimes there's some boats, particularly keel boats, when puffs hit, even if there's not a direction change, they can point closer to the wind. Either they feather up or do that. On FX, if there's no direction change but there's more breeze, do you wind up pointing higher?
I mean, yeah, you can. These boats, you're really controlled of your angle by considering the conditions, especially downwind. These girls have about 5 degrees of wiggle room when it gets really fresh. They don't really have much control over where they steer.
Cross coming up between the two Spanish teams. And out in the front, we've got Henkin and Tobias clearly in the lead. Then we've got this cross coming up with Echegayen and Suez. And it looks like it will be the boat on starboard, just maintaining that lead. But the Spanish are really arm wrestling it out.
And this second beat is brought to you by McGlide. Check out McGlide as an alternative to anti-fouling your boat. And this second beat is really shaking things up quite a lot. And I think that if these results stand as they are, we're going to see a real shake-up in the overall results. So these guys will be working super hard. We did mention the British team in a little bit of trouble on that first upwind. We're just having a look back through the fleet to see if they've improved. And they have just cracked into 18th, but will that be enough for them?
It's for them, it's deep. They've had a really consistent regatta, and their drop at the moment leading into this was an 11th. But back in 17th, I'm showing at the moment. So they are moving through the field, but still a long way for them to go to make this a keeper for them.
And they are running out of time.
But it's the Americans up on the starboard ley line now as they come up to the top third, the top mark approach. But the battle is on between the two Spanish, and then we go back to the Americans of Lutz and Weimers.
And it was Suarez and Van der Velden that did a really good job there. You know, they weren't quite on the correct side. They didn't benefit fully from that big lift we saw on port tack, but they have managed to tack at the right time, consolidate, and they're really within shooting distance now of their Spanish counterparts.
They certainly are, and this could be a big move in terms of the overall regatta, with Echegayen up there showing in second place, and the American and the Brits are deep. As we look at Henkin and Tobias, we've got the camera on board. We look at their style coming up towards the top mark. Still a little bit short of the ley line, but look at that as they tack and go back on port. Yeah, you make that point about, just in these conditions, how important it is to have a real athletic, strong person up front. And Anna Tobias, there's no one in better condition than her. And I think they're really showing the benefit of how to muscle an FX upwind and downwind. And, that athletic component is really paying dividends for this American combination.
It has been a little bit of a hit for them to have to do those 2 extra tacks. Obviously, the 49ers tacking much faster than the Nacras that we were watching yesterday, but they have second, third and fourth place that are super close together have really shortened that lead now, adding a little bit of pressure to these guys, but we saw them absolutely screaming downwind. So if they don't keep any errors, they should be in good shape.
It's a little bit quieter wind condition-wise. Right now we're showing just under 13 knots. Still good twin wiring conditions. So approaching Mark 3, this is around the top mark, and then down to the bottom to the finish. It is the USA team of Henkin and Tobias in the lead.
And we're on board with the set, which is absolutely excellent. Watching our race leaders get that spinnaker up, hit the wire, hook up, and absolutely send it on the downwind. And it will be Echegayen and Barcelo, the Spanish Team 23, that will be around in second place. You can see the skill set for these guys managing the boat weight. They're keeping a flat boat, getting that kite up, catching the sheet, and then trying to get up to speed as quickly as possible. They make it look so easy.
Yeah, they do. And after the disappointment of the regatta in Auckland, the 2019 regatta, what a comeback for Echegayen and Barcelo. They are second in this race. This will put them up into first position overall, as long as they get down to the bottom mark in good shape, because the British combination are in trouble down the back of the pack, and I just have a quick look. They're showing 17th for the GBR team. So as we would always expect on the last day of racing, it just gets tougher and tighter.
And we're on board now with Schutt and Nielsby. These girls have also had quite a difficult race so far. They're currently in 23rd position. These girls are in 3rd overall. So we're seeing a few of our top enders, the guys at the top of the fleet, have a little bit of a struggle, and that will definitely move things around on the leaderboard and perhaps create a few opportunities for those sailors in, you know, that 7th to 4th place to make a move.
Boat streaming around the top mark, and there's Lloyd and Ryan from Australia who went into this in 4th position, so they're down a little bit deep. They're showing currently in 13th for the Australians.
Nina, tell us a little bit about Stabik and Elks. I haven't heard much from that team, but they're hanging in there in the top 10.
Yeah, this is their second Olympic cycle, and they'll be pretty pleased to be in the gold fleet. Those girls, it's a good jump, and you know the Aussie FXs. We've had a little bit of trouble. You know, obviously the nation didn't send anyone to the last Olympics in Rio, and so these girls are trying to find their footing, and going into this regatta. I couldn't tell you who was going to be the performer, but it has been Lloyd and Ryan that have really stepped up to the chase. And in 12th position, it's not diabolical for those girls. It's still it's much better than being in the 20s. So if they can just put a few more points away, they'll be pretty comfortable considering where the Danish team is and also where the English team is.
So coming down the last leg, this is to the bottom mark, to the finish. It is Henkin and Tobias, then Echegai and Barcelo. And the great shots, full on pace, fully up to speed. The boats are fully twins on twin wires, heading down.
And I think these guys have hooked into a little bit of pressure. Their angle is pulling away, so they're on a really nice jibe here, on port jibe. They're getting a little bit of depth, and that may give them a bit of an advantage, hopefully, to pull away from their opposition. It's pretty close though, 67 metres between 1st and 2nd place. As we said, that double tack did close the gauge against 2nd and 3rd place to USA 9, who are out in the lead.
Yeah, I think USA 9, they're very close to going straight through. There'll be one jibing into the bottom mark. It looks like they've just completed their jibe, and it was completed with style as they drop down onto the trapeze. That just increases their riding moment when they straighten their legs out. You can see right just a little bit higher there for Tobias, just to make sure she feels comfortable, trimming the Jenica. Of course, the helmsman goes back onto the main sheet directly off the boom.
Now let's remember that Anna's a gold medalist from 2008, and one thing that's pretty surprising is that when she tried to come back into the Olympics about three or so years ago, she came back in the radial and she kind of had a false start. There were some problems. She had to get through some issues with the Olympic Committee, and then she even had a rough start getting into the FX. So it's hard to jump in, just like Robert Scheidt tried to get into the 49er, and it wasn't really for him. So Anna really pushed through, and it's really awesome to see that work ethic is paying off right now.
Few close crosses coming down in that fleet when we had that shot of the tracker. Two fleets kind of converging here. As we said, it's quite hard to control these boats and their angle and the pressure. But there we are. We have our race winners, USA, Heineken and Tobias, absolutely putting it away. And we know these girls are under a bit of pressure for Olympic selection. And so I'm sure that they will be so pleased with that result. Next coming across will be the Spanish team, 21, Suarez and Van der Velden. They have done a great job to close that gap, and they actually have got ahead of their Spanish counterparts, Echegoyen and Barcelo, who we can't see on our screen at the moment. There they are, making that jibe in now, 23. Those girls will be in 3rd place.
Yeah, something must have happened there. I think there was a positional change for the two Spanish teams. Next it will be Lutz and Weimers as they come over the line from Germany. And
great result for those German girls. We know that They're not sailing in their usual combination, and they'll be pretty pleased. You know, throwing in Lotte Weimers just before this event, pretty pleased to get a result away. And it will be Bad Nielsen and Thusgaard Olsen coming across. Those guys are in 5th place.
Yeah, good. There was a bit of action there between the boats just behind them. We could see port and starboard, and boats had to keep clear. That was, I think it might have been Mari and Stubbuck, and they're streaming through right on the line. This is going to be close. Whoa, and I think...
I'm going to give it to the French
I'm
team.
going to give it to the French just because they were still pressed up.
Really close finishes. These guys coming across in port in fine form, and it will be Finland just sneaking in there as well.
Remember, Sebastien Dubois, the French team, the last day of racing, they moved up from 15th to 6th. So they're obviously doing things right at the corners, and right there they looked like they picked off 2 or 3 boats at the finish.
Our current world champions, Netherlands, #1. Those girls coming across in 11th place, and really close finish here. We can see the British team trying to make up a few points, but it will be Austria, 61, getting across just ahead of the German team, and the British team finishing in before Australia, 71, Bryant and Wilmot. And it will be USA, 50, Roble and Shea in 17th place, and Parkinson and Clark coming into a really close cross. God, these finishes have been so close. They've really got to get their speed up. But I think it will be the Argentinian team getting ahead.
Yeah, the boats that can come in pressed up, I mean, if you have to sail deep to sort of squeeze over the line, it's really costly. And if someone comes in at pace from on port, from deep, you think, no, they're not going to nip it. And then, whoop, a lead change or a positional change. So that's been pretty interesting, you know, overall with, I think, when we look at the overall picture, and we are starting to run out of races. And we've got a new overall leader from Spain, Echegayen and Barcelo, and not